I wrestled deeply with who God was once I started having flashbacks of the abuse as an early teenager. And I also wrestled with what I believed about myself and the world around me. That was all incredibly hard. I became suicidal in my early teens. I just didn't want to live. There was something wrong with me. I believed that I wasn't normal. Um, I'd heard voices. It really took me into dark, dark paths.
So my guest is Becky Nordquist, and singer, songwriter, author, and survivor whose project Innocent Child offers a message of hope to those who have carried shame and silence for far too long. And Becky's heart in this project is to remind hurting people that what happened to them was not their fault.
I was a pastor's kid, and there were some influential people in our church, and I was sexually abused by them in this family. They were heavily involved. They were good friends of my parents. My mom did find out about the abuse and told my dad, and they chose to not do anything, and it was hidden for years. They were concerned with the church split. So my abuse did take place in the church. I didn't really think about it because when you're a little kid, you think it's normal. I had accepted Christ at a very young age, so I loved Jesus, but it all made it really confusing because my dad was also my first pastor.
So, Becky, talk about your story and what happened to you.
I think it was probably not long after that my abuse personally began. These were people within my dad's church, and I believe that the Holy Spirit knew that I would need him to make it through the years that came after that. My parents did find out about the abuse. They chose to do nothing because they were concerned with a church split. This family was very close to us. They were in leadership, and so I had a lot of exposure to this abuse. And that made things really complicated in a lot of ways. First of all, when you're that little, you don't have words for things and you think some of what happens to you is normal. I wrestled deeply with who God was once I started having flashbacks of the abuse as an early teenager. And I also wrestled with what I believed about myself and the world around me. That was all incredibly hard. I became suicidal in my early teens. I just didn't want to live. There was something wrong with me. I believed that I wasn't normal. I'd heard voices. It really took me into dark, dark paths. I knew that I needed help. My dad was against any type of therapy. Bless my mom, she stole me away to the town next door to get a couple of sessions in with a psychologist. And I remember I knew it wouldn't last long because my dad didn't believe in it. And one day, sure enough, the therapist had called me and she was like, I just read all your journals. And she said, I want you to go to your kindergarten room. I was 15 at the time. I was just about ready to get my license. She said, when you get your license, I want you to drive to your kindergarten room. And I want you to ask yourself if you could possibly blame anyone that small for the evil that happened to you. Could you blame anyone else the way that you're blaming yourself? So my dad actually was eavesdropping and he ended our relationship. And it
Mm.
sad because I was heartbroken. I was desperate. Like I said, I was suicidal. I felt like I had no one that I could go to. So I got my license, and one day I drove to my old elementary school, and ironically, my old kindergarten teacher was still teaching kindergarten, and they let me go sit in that room. And I just sat in there with the lights off, and I'm looking around at the walls and the tiny hands and the chairs, and I look over and there's this little teddy bear sitting in the chair next to me, and I just started to sob because I felt so alone. But for the first time, I connected the fact that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't my fault what happened, and that I would one day get the help I needed. And in that room, that's where I promised myself someday when I'm an adult, I will get the help I need.
Did you come to a point where, you were able to confront your father as an adult, maybe seeing now somebody after you've gone through therapy? Were you able to do that?
My mom was always very humble and repentant. She said it was the greatest mistake of her life, not kind of overriding my dad. It was really a lot my dad, why they didn't do anything. As far as my dad, so she and I had an incredible healing. I mean, God was so good. And, God's the ultimate forgiver, right? And reconciler, I guess. So it really is a surrendering thing that you have to do too. But I knew just before my dad died, I was in my early 20s and I had just started getting therapy and help and working through stuff. And he was dying, and I knew that I needed to release him before he left. And because his stance was always, well, you just need to forgive and forget. Forgiving, yes, you don't ever forget. So he and I never really got the chance to work through it. I never received the apology like I did from my mom. And I share that because it's important to understand that forgiveness is about you being set free and allowing God to do his thing, both in you and in the person who hurt you. So my dad and I did not have a great, beautiful, pretty story with a wrapped up bow, but I did sit with him and I took him by the hand. I said, I will never understand why you chose to protect the church and not protect your child. And also, in a way, protecting the people of this family because they continued to do evil. But Dad, I forgive you. And I know that God will love you in the way that you need to be loved. And, I got to say my piece, and he wasn't even conscious at that point, but there was a release there. And the Lord is so good in that when you just lay it at his feet, that he really does heal the broken places. And so I'm grateful I had the opportunity to at least sit with him and let him know that I chose to forgive him. As I told, in fact, that's exactly what I said, is I choose to forgive you, Dad, for not taking care of me.
Were you able at that point to release it?
It was a process. Absolutely. As far as my dad was concerned, because I think the father wound is a big one, especially in these situations where the person that was supposed to protect you and fight for you didn't do it. And that's really tough because your dad he's that first kind of picture of God the Father, right? And when he doesn't protect, it's like he's complicit in the pain. And while that's true for an earthly father, it's not true for God the Father. So learning and processing, I mean, we're talking years of therapy and processing, and a relationship with Jesus had to be kind of rebirthed. All those broken places of how I came to see God in all of the abuse and all of the pain that had to be torn apart and put back together, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. When you think about how you must have suffered as a child and nobody coming to your aid, so to speak, being able to help you understand it, but then growing into a teenager, and a teenager is already going through a lot of hormone stuff. Yours were probably set off like time bombs going. And there's got to be people that are watching this right now are thinking the same thing. Do you experience this as you talk to others?
I think a lot of us don't even realize how much it affects us, right? So, in talking with some people, I've heard, yeah, I just had these panic attacks and this anxiety, and I just can't figure it out. And then we'll be talking, and then I find out this is a part of their story, and I'm like, so did you ever process through that? Have you talked with the Lord through that? What has your journey looked like? So, depression and anxiety and all of the things that we experience, I feel like there are lights on a dashboard that say there's something wrong with the engine, kind of like a car, right? And so when you have these things, there's so much connected to it. And if you've never processed through what happened to you, you can't heal through it either. And then you talk to people who have kind of dummied it down or dismissed it. In fact, at the premiere, I'm talking with a counselor friend that I've known for a long time, and she goes, you know what? I've never considered this as part of my story, but I watched the documentary and I'm going, oh my goodness, that was child sexual abuse. I didn't even think about it. Because when you're little, you think it's kind of normal. But then years later, you find that these lights on the dashboard are going off and you're not really sure what it is. Maybe it's a hormonal imbalance, or we dismiss it to other things. And then lo and behold, you're like, oh my goodness, this was a part of my story. I didn't even think about it. When you're talking 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 women by 18 and 1 in 6 men by the age of 18 experience child sexual abuse, that's a lot of people. That's the person sitting next to you on the bus, or that's the person down the row at church from you that has been through something horrific. So, I mean, it's how people get through. Everybody's journey is different. Their walk with the Lord is different. Their healing path is different. And even their story of abuse is different. That's why you can't compare. But He individually comes to us and walks with us through that path. And we have to trust Him in that journey.
How has your faith in God been challenged, and how has He met you in that pain specifically?
Certainly, as a teenager, I walked. I said, I don't want to love a God that's willing to let that happen to me. You are not the God I thought you were. I thought you were going to keep me from harm. I thought you were going to make my life better. I thought that if I accepted you, then life would be good and I wouldn't be hurt and you would protect me and all these things. And so I walked away from the Lord for a long time, but coming back to Him, it was when I was hospitalized in a psychiatric unit because I was suicidal in my late 20s. Shortly after my dad died, I came to a peak. And I remember sitting on the floor of that hospital and just saying, God, I don't know if I can trust you. I'm not sure if you really exist. And yet I'm talking to him, which is, I find a little bit funny right now, but I need to know if you care. I just need to know because it's either you show me or we're done. I'm just never gonna turn back because it's hard for me to believe that you are who I thought you were and you allowed this, right? And so I'm literally screaming at the ceiling of my room and look over and there's my Bible on the desk and picked it up and I'm like, is there anything in this book for me? And I let the Bible fall open and my eyes land on Psalm 88. And it is the psalm. Years later, I'd find out they call it the Black Psalm because it is the psalm of deepest lament. But the psalmist is still saying that God is sovereign in all of the pain. And in that moment, I felt just this balm, if you will, wash over me. And it was like the Lord was saying, I'm here and I see you. And, you can't, it's hard to put into words for someone else what you've experienced because He comes to us in ways that are so personal. And my experience isn't going to be someone else's, but I know that when I called to Him, He answered in the way that I needed Him to answer. And it was just a turning of events that took place. And it was the first step of me beginning to hear Him and Him healing His reputation. Because what the enemy had done through all that abuse and pain was he had shredded God's reputation and who God really was. And so I was tempted to believe lies about myself. And God slowly began to dismantle the lies and remember His pieces of His character and who He created me to be. As we remembered the abuse, He remembered our relationship. If you can understand like what that looks like, where everything's shattered, but He takes the pieces and He reconfigures it all back to the way it was meant to be. So I'm so grateful that He's been so patient. And this is years. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon healing. And, it's like peeling layers off an onion. He takes it deeper. And it really, honestly, it's not even just sexual abuse, Nancy. It's anything that happens to us. It's really not about the detail of what happens to us. It's about what did we walk away believing because of what happened. And it can be applied to any tragic thing that happens in your life. We're tempted to believe that He walked away from us or He left us in the dirt or the dust, but that's a lie. And it's a beautiful thing if we live surrendered to Him being the one to tell us who He is and not letting circumstances say who He is.
I know that there are people who were attacked as either a child or coming into adulthood because they had something big to do for God. And Satan wanted to go after them in such a way that he knew it would, trip you up. But he also knew that you had something really big to do for God, which you are doing right now. And you're helping people through Innocent Child and what it's doing and the songs that you are singing in it. What role did the music and the worship or the writing play in the healing process of this?
Well, I've always found music to be a safe space and a place that's been healing for me since I was a kid. I really believe, and I've said this a lot, that God used music as a catalyst to keep me alive. Even in the years that I walked away from Him, I play French horn, I play the piano, I sing, all these things. And I just found that He spoke to me in the times that I wasn't speaking to Him through music. And then once I got involved with music for the soul, it was amazing because these songs directly spoke to my wounds. And I remember when I was singing Innocent Child in particular, that song, I literally could picture my little 3, 4 year old self standing in the corner and just taking my little girl face in my hands and saying, "You're going to be okay. You were innocent. This wasn't your fault. It wasn't anything you did. It wasn't anything you said. You were innocent in this." And that alone brings a lot of healing to my own heart. Writing certainly is very healing as well. And knowing that God can take something that's so evil, and He's done this over and over if we read the scriptures. He is the ultimate artist. And He is the most gifted at taking a black thread and turning it to gold. I mean, that's just who He is. And certainly He's done that in my life. And music has played such a huge part. And the music through Music for the Soul, being able to record it and sing it and share it, it just, I don't know, it kind of covers like salve on a wound. And it also works from the inside out. It's been a beautiful experience.
This book, Innocent Child, is coming out, and you also have a documentary that goes along with it. Can you talk about that and what you feel like it's going to be doing?
The documentary is, everybody has said the word powerful, I think, at some point when they've talked about it, as far as the reviews and things, and the reviews are really coming back outstanding. You know, the nice thing about it is it's a little bit of everything. So you have survivor stories, you have clinicians in there, but you also have spoken word and music video and animation and lots of different avenues for healing. And I think it's beneficial for the survivor. It's beneficial for a survivor's family to gain understanding. You know, sometimes people don't understand why a person relates or reacts a certain way especially within a familial context. I mean, they just think they're the old grumpy aunt or whatever. But when you know somebody's story, and if you understand it within the context of child sexual abuse, you gain insight, first of all, on how to lovingly relate to them, but also to be patient in their healing process. It's a lifelong sentence you didn't ask for, and certainly God can heal it, and He does, but gaining more understanding and awareness is really important. I think this is so widespread, I'd call it pandemic level. And so I'm hoping and praying that the documentary will help people understand it, and it will encourage people to talk about it. The people who didn't have words, may they find their words. The people who are afraid to talk about it, may they find their voice. And so, yeah, I'm grateful to the Lord that it came out. I think it's going to be highly beneficial. The devotional is a whole other thing. It's not meant to be consumed in 30 days. It's a short book, but a devotional a week, and having someone walk with you through it, whether it's a counselor, a trusted friend. Eventually, this will be available for churches to take small groups through. But in the devotional, you've got music, that a QR code where you can go right to the song that correlates with the devotional day, and therapeutic helps as well in each devotional segment. So yeah, they kind of all work together. So it's a beautiful package for therapists too. I know therapists that are already using the project with their clients as they traverse the waters of healing and their abuse story.
And so, Becky, where can they find out more about you and about the project and get the book?
I have a website, beckynordquist.com. However, most of the wonderful things are found at www.innocentchild.net. That's where you can view the documentary. There's lists of songs for men and women. And also, you can find the devotional there, or you can order the devotional on Amazon. And also, musicforthesoul.org also carries all of our other healing resources.
Okay. And so, what would you like to leave my audience with today?
Don't give up. You're worth it. You're worth the journey. You're worth the healing work. And the Lord has something in store for your life beyond what you could ever imagine. Oh my goodness, I never would have dreamed. And maybe you're sitting there going, I'm not a singer, I'm not a writer. I mean, how is God going to use something big like this? But you have to remember that we bloom where we're planted. And wherever you're planted is where God wants your vessel. And He needs to use your vessel. He loves to work through your vessel. And it heals you in the process. And He can make it so that you shine like you never dreamed possible. And He can restore your innocent child. Restoration is possible, and so is healing.
If Becky's story has touched something tender in you, I want you to be encouraged to reach out for support and take healing seriously. You're not alone, and there's help, hope, and restoration available. So this is The Call with Nancy Sabato, and thank you for joining us today. And may God continue to bring healing, truth, peace in every wounded heart.